What made you think this person is a psychopath? One day as a teen, a friend showed up with a classmate who we never really hung out with before that. That day, he found an occupied bird's nest in my window awning and flipped it, causing fledgling little birdies to glide in several different directions. No sign of parents. They couldn't quite fly yet. I went around trying to gather the little birds I could spot in a possibly hopeless attempt to put the nest back up and put the birds in it. This took a few minutes of treading carefully while scanning the grass left and right. Then I hear the freak kid say, "You guys won't be mad, will ya?" I look up and he's holding a cinder block over his head, standing over one of the birds I hadn't found yet. I said, "Yes, I will," and he just dropped the block on the bird. Kid was a piece of shit, and we never associated after that. Roommate meets a dude and invites him over for a beer. The dog would not chill when a guy was in the house. Ears back, hackles raised, continuous growl. An otherwise friendly dog just lit up. It was a very contagious feeling, and we were all on edge except the guy, who acted like it was a natural response. A few months later, the guy went to prison for the violent assault of a stranger. Bible sales lady who used to go door to door selling special edition Bibles. Lady had those wild eyes. Made all the neighbor kids cry every time she showed up. All she had to do was look at them. Turn out, the lady used to hit the bottle big time. Even gave her husband a black eye. Last I heard, the lady was doing time at that place in Chowchilla, and her husband was living off the grid. Wild shit. When I was about 18, I helped a friend of a friend move. Dude was a weirdo, but I thought he was okay. Did not really know him. He talked about his cat, but I never saw it, thought he was in a cage somewhere. After a couple of hours of hauling stuff, he opens the freezer. There is the cat, jumping out and running for its life. I was so pissed, but the guy laughed and was like, "Well, it's a hot day, and I also did not want it to leave while we moved boxes." Like there was no other solutions. He thought it was the funniest shit. Cat got out and we never saw it again. Hope it did not get frostbites. It was there for at least 2 to 3 hours. This wasn't during the initial meeting, but when an ex-girlfriend got jealous of me helping her own daughters with their homework. It was a toxic relationship, and I stayed way too long because I loved being a dad to her girls so much. Granted, I had my own kids, but they were teenagers and didn't need me as much. Also, her girl's dad was a terrible drug addict, and she didn't really do much in the way of parenting, so I felt compelled to stay longer than I should have. I got chatting to a girl at work once. We went out for lunch cause she seemed cool, and ended up sitting at the edge of a canal munching sandwiches. There's a pigeon with a gammy leg hanging around hoping to get some food. She lured it closer and closer to her, with bits of bread as we were talking, and when it got close enough, she just knocked it into the canal. Turned around to me laughing her arse off like it was the funniest thing ever, and was shocked that I wasn't impressed. Was watching a movie called Passengers involving a sleeper ship in space. The main character's cryopod malfunctions and wakes him up many years before everyone else is to wake up. He's essentially marooned in a ship alone with no way of getting help or putting himself back to sleep. Great movie BTW. I was watching it with my mother-in-law. As soon as it dawned on the main character how fucked he was, she chimes in without hesitation and said, "I just pull someone else out of their sleep chamber, and it can be their problem," with the implication of taking their pod. I laughed as it was a pretty good joke for the moment, but she doubled down in a serious tone. Never really looked at her the same after that. My husband's cousin. Within 5 minutes of meeting him, he started telling me about all the animals he trapped and killed in his backyard. He lives in a subdivision and lures animals, and so he can trap them and then shoot them. In the 11 years now that I've known him, I've gotten that part of the family, husband's aunt/uncle and cousin, in trouble for animal abuse twice. They don't particularly like me. There really isn't much more we can do other than report actual illegal activity when we see it. When I was 6 or 7, we had this project at school where the teacher got us 2 caterpillars and we tried to raise them all the way to butterflies. 2 kids always stayed about 15 minutes longer after school to take care of them for the day. When it was my time to care for them, the kid that had to do it with me just took them in his hand, ran out off the school, and stomped them to death. Sounds mild compared to some of the stories, but a girl from our uni group openly telling our group that she deliberately broke her ex's relationship with his best friend by faking interest in the music genre the friend was interested in and flirting with him, then cheerfully describing how they actually, physically, fought over her. She broke with her BF soon after that, telling him that she has to focus on her studies, and then stringing him along by telling him that they could be together when she's graduated, until she found someone else. I was in my first year of psychology, and through some colleagues' friends I had met this girl. We arranged to grab a coffee in the afternoon, and she asked me for a ride. I told her it was no problem, but that my sister would also be in the car since I needed to drop her off at swim practice. She refused the ride, but I didn't think much of it, assuming she might feel uncomfortable. We met up for coffee, and she suddenly had a jealous outburst, saying she was ready to make all the sacrifices for our relationship. What relationship? It was the first date, for heaven's sake. But she wasn't willing to tolerate the presence of any other woman, even if she was related by blood, her exact words. She said she felt like it was love at first sight, and that I couldn't hurt her by giving my attention to other people. Needless to say, I ran away. There was definitely a love bombing as big as the Titanic. A guy came for a job interview and gave me the creeps immediately in a way I've never felt before. I've had interactions with shady people in the past, but this dude triggered something else. I thought it was just me, so I didn't say anything until a colleague pointed out, and everyone was scared. He didn't do anything specific I could point out. It could have been micro-expressions. There was something off. Just occurred yesterday. I was on a work call, and this guy is eating a bag of gummy bears. He goes on to tell us he likes the stale gummy bears. What he does is opens a bag of gummy bears, puts them on a shelf, and waits years for them to age. He labels them so he knows when they were opened. The bag he was eating yesterday was from 2022. I met a guy at a party who was a volunteer firefighter. He was entertaining a couple of people talking about the funniest fire he's been out to. An elderly couple had died in the fire, and when they were cleaning up the ruins, one of the other firefighters had shoved his shovel into the elderly man's torso where it was stuck. When telling the story, he was laughing and found it so funny. I have never been so repulsed by a person. Gallows humor. Super common in professions that deal with death on a regular basis. It's a coping mechanism. It was the person I was dating at the time. New relationship. It was just the two of us hanging out, and the way that he acted made me think that he thought he was performing for others. I can't quite explain the experience, but it felt truly bizarre and off-putting. Like, does this man think he's on a TV show right now? We also had an argument where he was mad at me for something that had literally never happened between us. I asked for an example of whatever it was, and he said he couldn't think of one right now. I genuinely don't think he could tell fact from fiction. He wasn't okay. When I was 20, I met a guy at my friend's place. My friend was 35, and this guy I could tell was older than my friend. The guy asked for a drive when I leave, so I agree, trying to be nice. On the drive, he asks how old I am and proceeds to say, "I've spent more time in prison than you've been alive." He ended up back in jail a few months later for beating his girlfriend. At an upscale hotel bar in St. Augustine, my GF and I sat down next to this younger guy, and he was friendly but super drunk. He seemed happy drunk, but started turning angry drunk, and he started accusing me of rigging the economy. Something millennial versus boomer, I'm Gen X argument. I turn away from him, and he starts a fight with another couple to his other side. We go back to our room, and I take the dog outside for a walk. There in the middle of the street, our good buddy, now shirtless, screaming at some cops who just dragged him outside. He was going on accusing the cops of being Nero and several other things a college kid says when they like to fancy themselves as intelligent. It's too bad. I actually still like the guy. Went hiking in the snow, was alone, saw nobody for miles. Nothing but abandoned cars on the side of the road. I went across the road from where I parked to look at a sign, reading that a fine of $14,000 would go to whoever stepped foot on this one trail. I turned back around, and someone had stuck a bag to my car using the poop within said bag. Not a noise or person nearby at all. I just figured some weirdo was camping nearby. I go up to the BR Parkway, closed in the winter, but open to hikers. I stayed out until sundown, taking photos with my new camera. I drive in the dark, back to a town where my brother lived about an hour away. I stop at an Arby's and tell them about the strange day I had. The guy there goes, "Oh, that area is supposed to be blocked off. They're doing a manhunt for an armed fugitive, so the poop on my car was not just weirdo poop, but armed fugitive poop. Likely a psycho who had my back turned to them. And instead of killing me or robbing me, they just stuck poop to my car and ran off into the Appalachian wilderness." It was when a brand new boss told me, "This is how we do things." I'd been with the company for years through two major tragedies, murder, had a lot thrown at me as a manager and dealt with it and rebuilt. I thought in our first meeting he would ask questions and get up to speed. He acted like I was the newcomer. I quit after a few months and left him in the lurch. I know he unsettled other people. Cold vibe. I'm the kind of guy that, if I'm in a team, I'm going to be the leader of that team. Doesn't matter who we are, doesn't matter what we're doing. I'm a leader. That's what I do. Within 2 minutes of meeting him at a networking event. Very wealthy finance dude in his 50s who believed himself to be some kind of superhuman leader of men. I felt very sorry for the people who had to work with him. I was working as an extra when movies were being filmed a lot in New Orleans 7 or 8 years back. One of my first gigs, I was sitting around waiting with a small group of other extras, and we were chit-chatting to pass the time while waiting for production to need us. One of the men starts talking about how he used to poison neighborhood cats because he didn't like them around his boat. Then he tells us about a time he's at a friend's house and their cat goes missing. He said he told their kid that it was the meat they were barbecuing. IDC if you're not a cat person. Poison is a horrible way to die, and I'd be furious if someone joking said we were eating my niece's missing cat. Walking down Broadway in NYC minding my own business when a dude walking past me just hauled off and slugged me really hard in the chest, not quite on my boob, but damn it hurt. I turned around and yelled, "What the F-U-C-K?" And the guy starts yelling, "What? What?" In like a "what are you gonna do about it" kind of way. I was all ready to lose my shit on him, but the look on his face stopped me. Scary. Cold. He was just looking for an excuse. So I just kept walking and was freaked out all day after that. Some people just give you the creeps. I went round to this guy's house to pick up an old Wurlitzer organ. Seemingly fairly normal. I'd seen him about town, lived somewhere pretty remote, and the biggest town was about 2,000 people. He did stuff like gardening and things, bit of voluntary work like some maintenance at the old folks' home, cutting the grass and hedges at a couple of the churches, general handyman stuff, just old retired guy stuff. He helped me load this massive 1950s Whirly into the back of my mate's van that I'd borrowed for the day. I just felt something was off about the whole setup, just something a bit Royston Vassy about it all. Him, his wife, his 40-something daughter, early 20s granddaughter, and young great-granddaughter all lived together. Nice house, nice garden, not nice vibe. Sometime later it transpired that he had been arrested and carted off to jail. His granddaughter and great-granddaughter? Yeah, he'd fathered both of them. 30 years or so later I still have that organ. Can't figure out what to do with it. I should sell it, but it's so heavy and they'd want me to move it. I sat down to talk with a private equity representative that was looking to buy the company I worked for. There was no emotion, no friendliness, no charisma. Just a dead, hollow stare. The normal things you pick up on when meeting a new person just weren't there. I told the owner of the company that was my impression. This guy seems like a sociopath. He ended up selling it regardless. Bought a new Escalade, and nobody got anything for helping to build the company other than this psycho as our new CEO. He proceeded to push anyone out that had been there for a while. I saw the writing on the wall and got out of my own accord for more pay and less work. To be fair, he didn't do anything outwardly malicious. It was just a slow burn of pushing numbers around. I imagine a lot of MBAs to be like this. Went on a coffee date with a guy off a dating app. He seemed quirky while texting, but meh, aren't we all so whatever? Met for coffee, and he got angry that I bought my own. It's coffee. And while getting to know each other, he cheerfully tells a story about popping the eyes off goldfish as a kid, and about watching his stepmom moving into his dad's house through the scope of his rifle. When I declined his very direct an invitation to go to his apartment for sex, he got angry and said that he cleaned his apartment, so I owed him at least that much before rejecting him. Then he waited in the parking lot to see which car I got into, and presumably wanted to follow me home. I called the coffee shop from the bathroom and told them what happened, and didn't come out until he had been long gone. Didn't even formally meet the fella. First time I pulled up to a friend's place as the guy was pulling off. For whatever reason, the guy didn't like the cut of my jib. Only reason I know that is because my friend told me the guy was eyeballing me, and just to forget it. I noticed but didn't think twice. Come to find out the reason he was at my friend's house is because he had just got out of jail for 2 attempt murder charges and he wanted to see his friend. Fast forward a few weeks. Headed out to a bar, attempted murderer is there. I had no idea he would be there. We were in his part of the city, but I didn't consider it as being a problem. Saw the guy across the bar. The same friend I saw him with the first time came walking over and said, "Just turn around, man. Don't stay." He told me if you stay, he's going to kill you, believe him. So I said my goodbyes and left. Another few weeks further on, I happened to be out of town, but Buddy came to my house with 2 friends. My roommates let them in for whatever reason, and the guy proceeded to beat the dog's hit out of one of the guys that came with him. Trashed our living room. Broke the TV, a chair, a table, and a lamp. Fast forward some weeks/months later, and that same guy wound up murdering 2 people. He's locked up forever, I think. Too late for those 2 poor bastards. Thankful for anyone else he had his sights set on for no reason. When I was in 1st grade, there was this girl who in hindsight was a pathological liar. She lied about anything and everything. It was very off-putting. Anyways, she killed my hamster by purposefully stepping on her, right in front of me, then lied over and over again that she hadn't done it when confronted by adults. Her name is Kara. If I ever run into her as an adult, it's on sight. I can tell you that. I was a kid, 6 or 7, and my cousin would babysit us. She had a boyfriend and left me and him to take care of a toddler. Cousin was early mid-20s, and so was her boyfriend. We were playing GTA, and the toddler was crying. He told me to put the toddler in the bedroom and close the door. I did. When my cousin got home, maybe a half hour, maybe 2 hours later, hard to tell because I was so young, the toddler was crying because his diaper was full. I knew better, but looking back at it now that I'm 28, what the fuck? I work in a prison, and many of them are dangerous men. Some are essentially harmless, but mad dumb mistakes like driving without a license after several DWIs. There are a few truly dangerous apex predators in each prison that you can spot from 100 yards away. Even at that distance, they look dangerous. When I was a kid and still forced to go to church by my mother, there was this other kid my age, maybe 14, who was getting really involved in the church and wanted to be a preacher. He even would do these little mini sermons from time to time during the normal service. Anyway, immediately before he gave one of these sermons about peace and brotherhood, he casually mentioned that he had a bearded dragon and got tired of it, so he filled its water bowl with Windex. The way he said it with no emotion and then put on a big smile when he walked up to the podium was chilling. There was this weird kid who came to our school in the middle of the year. People didn't like him that much because he was rude and liked to shove other kids during recess, but he kept to himself about half the time, so nobody was really that wary of him. I was a kid who got bullied a decent amount, and at that time I didn't have many friends, so my 12-year-old brain figured maybe he just needed a friend too. I saw him out by my neighbor's house, messing with something on the ground. Beyblades were a whole thing in the neighborhood, so I assumed it was something like that. I went to say hi, and as I approached, he picked up his scooter and crushed some twigs or something. Reader, I got closer and discovered that it was a pigeon. He had knocked one out of the air with a rock somehow, and had been slowly prodding and crushing it. It was squirming. I avoided him until he was transferred out later in the year. A friend of a friend started reminiscing at a party about when they were kids and used to torture animals. Always had suspicions about this person, and you could tell he was pissed about his fellow psycho revealing these childhood details. The cloak totally dropped. Started noticing more and more unexplained behaviors, and noped right out of that friendship. Once I had a part-time job as a teacher at an elementary school. Kids were sitting and doing their homework when all of a sudden that weird kid stood up, looked around the room quietly, and said, "I'll slit all of you open." Needless to say, after this incident, the kid was kicked out of school and was never to be seen again. I visited the most northern place in Northern Ireland, and there was an old woman who had a souvenir shop selling gollywogs amongst other things. She really gave us the creeps, and my mate kept joking about how we were going to all end up dead. I honestly don't think she was racist. She is just so remote, she probably hasn't had any meaningful contact with society to realize those dolls are now considered offensive. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.